The Articles of Confederation. What were the Articles of Confederation? The Articles were the first governing documents in America, and it was created by the Second Continental Congress. It was drafted during the American Revolution and ratified in 1781, and the Articles established a loose confederation of sovereign states with a weak central government. The reason for a weak central government was that they wanted to avoid tyranny. They didn't want to infringe on states' rights, and they also took inspiration from Greek city-states. The Articles aimed to preserve the independence and sovereignty of each state while working together for common defense and economic interests. This is also known as dual federalism, which will be covered in a future video. What were some of the Article's powers and limits? To start, it could create, it created the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which was arguably the most important thing that the Articles did for the nation. In this Northwest Ordinance, it gave guidelines for the requirements of statehood, and in this ordinance, it prohibited the slaves. It prohibited slaves in the Northwest Territory. There was also equal representation and a unicameral legislature, which meant that there was only one house in Congress, and each state only had one vote. They also had the power to declare wars and make treaties, coin and borrow money, and change the Articles. However, to change the Articles, they needed a unanimous decision, which meant that every 13 out of 13 states had to agree in order to amend the Articles. This wasn't easy. This wasn't easy, and the Founding Fathers made it so that it wasn't easy, as they did not want articles that affected the rights of people to be easily added to the Constitution. But what couldn't it do? They couldn't tax. And as a result of this, they could not raise a standing army. So they had to ask states for troops, even though they could make even though they had the power to make a standing army and navy. They also only had one governmental body, which was the Congress. This meant that they did not have an executive or legislative branch, and they also could not regulate commerce between the states. As a result of this, they could not provide unity among the states, which led to further problems down the line. One of these issues was Shays' Rebellion. Shays' Rebellion was in Massachusetts in 1786 to 1787, and it was during the post-Revolutionary War period. This was a time of great economic turmoil and financial instability, and many veterans, they faced financial hardships and were unable to pay their debts and state taxes. However, state taxes kept increasing, leaving them unable to pay, taking their property away. Daniel Shays was a poor farmer who was the leader of this rebellion. In August 1786, when Shays and his followers, they raided the courts in western Massachusetts, and they tried to prevent the courts from seizing the property of the people. This turned violent, and the national government could not help, as they could not raise an army. They could not raise their own army without the states. This left Massachusetts to handle this themselves, and it was only after wealthy elites who created their own army to send to stop this rebellion that this rebellion was stopped. In the end, this showed weakness of the Articles and called for reform. This had an immediate effect, and James Madison, he knew that this was a problem. And after this, they had the Annapolis Convention, which was the first convention that tried to create reform. This will be covered in a future video. But what should we take away? The Articles gave to a limited central government, which meant that the Articles established a weak central government with limited powers. Most authority was left to the individual states, which meant they couldn't enforce the laws either that they created in Congress. They also had a unicameral legislature, which meant that the Articles, it created only one house in Congress, where each state only had one vote. There was no executive or judicial branch, which did not coincide with what we value today of checks and balances and separation of powers. Northwest Ordinance was probably the one thing that the Articles did do, and it created guidelines for statehood. And finally, Shays' Rebellion. This rebellion exposed the weakness of the Articles, highlighting the need for a stronger central government. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for next video.